This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Today is my birthday. And for my birthday, I always like to choose a video topic that is about my favorite aspect about the Cleveland Browns or where the Cleveland Browns are at this moment. Now, it's a little tough, your birthday being in May, to pick something, but definitely for me, my favorite thing about the Cleveland Browns to talk about, and just my favorite thing about football to talk about, is defense. Right? Offense is fun. Everybody loves offense. But I'm a big fan of defense. And when we're talking about defense and we're talking about expectations for a defense, there is a team in the NFL that I think has some of the highest expectations in football, or at least within its own fan base, and that's the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns defense last year. And I'm tired of sugarcoating it. I'm tired of acting like it wasn't what it is. The Browns defense last year was the best defense in the NFL. They were number one in least total yards given up in the NFL. They were number one in least first downs given up in the NFL. Both first downs given up through passing attempts and rushing attempts. Both categories still had the least in both. They had the lowest score percentage in the NFL. They were number one in 3 and outs. Now, I know when I say that, there will be some people who say, well, what about the road defense? I did a whole video about that a couple months ago, that the road defense numbers are just simply wrong. Like, it includes a lot of stuff from games where the starters didn't play or parts of games where the starters didn't play. It includes points that were mainly created by the Browns offense, not necessarily because of a bad effort by the Browns defense. I think most of the road game stats, while the Browns weren't equally as good on the road as home, they weren't that much worse on the road than they were. And I think they mostly ended up a victim of offensive turnovers on the road more so than straight up bad defense. But they're the best defense in the NFL. And when you're returning the best defense in the NFL, and the Browns are, right? They brought back everybody. Look for all the major players. They're all there. They're all going to be playing the same position. They brought them all back. So when you're returning the number one defense in the NFL, and your number one defense in the NFL has the number one defensive player in the NFL in Myles Garrett, expectations are going to be high. But my question is, when expectations are that high, where do you set the bar? See, setting the bar for the defense last year was easy because they sucked, right? They were like 32nd and 38th and 20th in almost every ranking. So it was real easy to set the expectation for the Cleveland Browns defense to just get the normal. Let's get the 15. Let's get the top 10. Let's be better in this area. Let's be slightly better in this area. Let's be less atrocious as a run defense. Let's be less egregious of a passing defense in coverage unit. This year is much different. I could look at this defense and say, well, they need to get to the quarterback more, but they were already top 5 in sacks last year. I could say they need to get more pressure, but they were top 5 in pressure. Like, unless my expectation is that they lead the league in literally every category, which is unrealistic and setting them up for failure, then I don't know how to really set the bar. And I think a perfect player on the team that's kind of analogous of the entire conversation of improving this defense and talking about the expectation of the defense is like Myles Garrett. Because my question as it relates to this is, the same way you ask the Browns, how do you measure improvement for this defense, is the same way you can ask me, and I would be kind of at a loss for words on how to describe this, is how do you measure improvement for Myles Garrett? Myles Garrett and expectations for Myles Garrett is a very complicated dance. Because how do you judge his success? Now, I know some of you are telling me, well, you judge it by the numbers. You just judge it by the sack numbers and the pressure numbers and this and that. But keep in mind that Myles Garrett won Defensive Player of the Year last year, not because of his cumulative numbers, in spite of his cumulative numbers, right? His sack numbers weren't as impressive as TJ Watt's. But he won Defensive Player of the Year, so convincingly so that Micah Parsons even admitted that Myles Garrett should win it before the award was even announced. He won Defensive Player of the Year because of his impact on the defense. It's not something that can really be measured. Because Myles Garrett is a force of nature, because teams are terrified of Myles Garrett, they give him the Revis Island treatment, but as a defensive edge, which means that they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that he cannot collect a stat. We're not going to run towards Myles Garrett. We're not going to pass and hold the ball for more than 2 seconds so Myles Garrett could get there, right? We're not going to put ourselves in position to let Myles Garrett get a pressure. We're going to triple team him. We're going to chip him and double. If we single him up, we're running away from Myles Garrett to start the play. So how do you judge his success? Sacks are not an accurate barometer of how good Myles Garrett's playing. That got proved last year. Nor are pressures at this point. Like maybe pass rush win rate, maybe double team, but you're really just going to have to judge this thing by seeing it. And honestly, it might even be something that's difficult to see because the impact is going to be so normal for people watching the game when the Browns are playing, right? If you just watch Browns games and you just see how teams play against Myles, you're just going to be used to that you're probably going to get blind to it. When it comes to great players, I know that there are folks who think that Cleveland does not appreciate great players, right? Because people complain about LeBron James when he was here. People complained about Kyrie Irving when he's here. But the truth about greatness is when you see it every day, it's real easy to confuse that consistency that player shows you as normal, right? It's easy to think it's normal to see what think about this. We knew that Nick Chubb going out of this offense was going to be a big deal when it happened, right? But I don't think we grasp how big of a deal it was until like week 8, right? Because we were still on we could get by on the committee. We could get by this and that. And, Nick Chubb's important, but you could replace him with this. And by the time we got to the end of the season, man, we realized that dude was different. Myles Garrett is very similar. It's very easy to take Myles Garrett for granted because teams are so afraid of Myles that they try to intentionally take him out the game. But if Myles Garrett wasn't on the field for an extended period of time, like he was when he got suspended in 2019, boy, you could tell. Boy, you could tell. So Myles Garrett is an interesting one to talk about expectations and how to make this defense better and how do you judge it. But let's talk about some areas where this defense, that again was the best defense in football last year, where this defense can improve and get even better. Let's talk about the secondary. Secondary is very good. Again, they gave up the least passing first downs in all of football last year. And they gave up the least passing yards as a defense in all of football. Teams really didn't pass against the Cleveland Browns. They didn't find that as a great strategy. Part of that reason, again, Myles Garrett. You want to know how you can avoid Myles Garrett? By not passing the ball. This obviously helped the Cleveland Browns when they're playing with 5 different quarterbacks, right? Because what evens the playing field when you don't have consistent quarterback play more than a defense that discourages teams from throwing the football? So if you want to know why the Browns were able to get away with it and why the defense was a big part of it, just think about stuff like that. The secondary, the one area that I want them to make sure that they get better in is just zone coverage, right? We talked about this. Year 2, you should be better at zone coverage. You should give up less big plays. Now, there's one area where the entire defense needs to get better. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. But they just need to get better at zone coverage. Stay healthy, obviously. I think the secondary really of any unit on the defense had the most issues staying healthy. You want to make sure that Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson can finish the season clean. Same thing with Greg Newsome. Two of those guys have had issues staying healthy the last couple of years. Newsome actually more so than Ward. So you want to make sure that goes down. But that's not where I expect a big jump to be in year 2. Run defense. That was an area where the Browns were just good last year. They weren't great. They weren't a great run defense. They weren't bad. They weren't as bad as they were in 2021, given the fact that we were coming off of a season in 2022 where the Browns might have been the worst run defense in NFL history, or at least in recent NFL history. These numbers aren't that bad considering where they were, right? But they gave up the 11th most rushing yards, the 11th most rushing touchdowns, and they were ranked 20th on yards per carry. So not great numbers, just good numbers that could get better. And that's certainly an area where the Browns could get better. But here's the number one area. The number one area where the Browns can improve and where I expect them to improve. And if they improve in this area, they will be better than they were last year. Penalties. This Browns defense gave up, or we're called for the 5th most penalty yards in the NFL. They also gave up the 16th most first downs via penalty in the NFL. And they were the most penalized defense in the NFL. A lot of the times when the Browns defense struggled, whether at home or on the road, it was them doing it to themselves. I remember saying this during the season, something I'll say probably during this season. The Browns defense could only beat themselves at times, right? There were a couple times where the Browns got off the field, got an unnecessary penalty, lets the team get on, they create momentum, they score when they should have never scored. In year 2 of the Jim Schwartz system, I expect there to be a command of this defense to where these kind of penalties don't happen as much, where you can reduce this, where you can be the 20th most penalized unit and the 20th in penalty yards instead of 5 and 16th respectively. And you really should not be the most penalized defense in all of football. Now, I get it. The Browns are aggressive, so they're just going to get up there in penalties at times. But you should have a command of this defense to the point to where you aren't a super penalty-prone defense, right? Like, it's okay to be in the top 8 to 15, but you really don't want to be anywhere above that. So that's the area where if they improve, they will be the best defense in the NFL again, and maybe one of the best defenses in the last few years. And they definitely won't have the road defense issues that they had last year. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.